We broadcast on WRWK.
Good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is WRWK 93.9 FM in Midlothian, Virginia. My name is Stephanie, and thank you for joining me for another episode of In the Frequency of Hope. Got a couple of announcements that we're going to be starting with. So let me pull my announcements out for you. And here we go. First and foremost, we would like to thank all of our contributing members of the community who have so graciously provided funding for WRWK in order for us to keep coming to you and doing what we are doing. So I would like to acknowledge Ron, Ian, Lee, Karen, Mark, Lisa, Leslie, Stephanie. Who else do I have on my list? I also have WRWK is a volunteer-run independent public radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you great programming. It takes roughly $60 a day to keep WRWK on air. You can ensure the life of this station by making a donation or volunteering. Information at theworkfm.org. Citizen Voices has been remote from Bent Mountain for the last few weeks at least. So I expect that Jay will be back on Sunday. That's the 11th, bringing you Citizen Voices. In addition to that, if you are facing homelessness here in the Richmond area, I just want to provide a little information to folks. There is a homeless crisis hotline. If you are homeless or you will lose your housing within the next 3 days, please call 804-972-0813. There are some services available to help you navigate the challenges that are associated with being homeless. There are also a variety of places listed that provide indoor meals that are open to the community. So there are these information sheets. I found this at the main library. Maybe they're available in other libraries within the city, or I'm not sure where. But anyway, that's where I got mine. And we will be happy to share any and all of the information that's on this sheet for services if somebody needs it. So feel free to contact us and we'll pass on the good news that we know. WRWK is brought to you by support by local partners such as the Thrifty Quaker. Located in the Midlothian Station Shopping Center at the corner of Midlothian Turnpike and Coalfield Road, the Thrifty Quaker sells donated items to support the work of 12 varying, mostly local charities each year. Let me see. This month, during the month of August, the sponsored charity is the Carol Adams Foundation. The mission of the Carol Adams Foundation is to provide emergency assistance to men, women, and children who are victims of domestic violence. You can get more information at thriftyquaker.com. Support for WRWK is also provided by Affordable Home Inspection. With over 15 years of experience, Jeremy Rowan, owner and master inspector of Affordable Home Inspection, offers insured and bonded home inspection, including heating systems, air conditioning units, roof condition, electrical service, interior structural elements. Serving Richmond, Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, Petersburg, Williamsburg, and Alexandria. You can get more information at affordablehomeinspec.com. This week, do I have something on me? 8. I do. Good. This week on the Self-Care Activist, Al Condi of Elysium Fitness will take the host seat for the Self-Care Activist from 4 to 6 p.m. with a conversation about fitness and self-care. Mary will be back the following Thursday, August 15th, with guest Rabbi Patrick Bueller of Kehilla. You can get more information at theworkfm.org and just address your message to the Self-Care Activist. And I think that's it. I think I'm done with our announcements. So hopefully we are going to get some phone calls tonight, and other folks out there are going to be phoning in and telling me what you're thinking about. That would be really, really handy, because I already know what I think. I have spent the last couple of days just really incredibly busy with my work, and not that I wasn't ruminating and thinking about some things that I wanted to discuss, by means of a show, but I really didn't have time to organize my thoughts, write anything down to prepare for this, which is why I elected to just do an open format so that you guys out there have a place to collect. We can gather here and use this as a place for people to come in and drop off some of what you're thinking about. Maybe you want to stay involved with the conversation a little bit longer, and perhaps engage with other folks out in the community, or not. But we would love to hear from you and kind of see what else is going on out there. Until I hear from somebody else, of course, I will be sharing my thoughts with you. And I think, like many other people, I was really impacted, saddened, distraught. I'm trying to think of all the words that I want to use to describe the sensations in having this past week filled with just a shocking level of gun violence between what happened at the Garlic Festival in California, what happened at the Walmart in El Paso, and what happened in the Oregon district in Dayton, Ohio. And I think that is one of the things that I think it would be probably really useful for people to have a place. This is a forum for people to come in and just kind of say whatever it is that you would like to say, because as I have been talking to folks since I started my program, your community is exactly what you define it to be. It can be your street, it can be your development, your subdivision, it can be your city, your state, it can be the whole country, it could be the whole world. You get to define. Excuse me, I'm feeling wavy this evening, so I'm bonking into the microphone. You get to define, how big your community is, and what that means to you, and what you want to be with that, who you want to be with that. Because I think that becomes very important when we consider our interaction with others and the impact down the line. And so I'm hopeful that this will be an interesting place that will stimulate some further conversation. But again, I know what I've been exposed to. I know what I've been thinking about. And so I feel a bit out of the loop, perhaps, on some things that are happening maybe a little more locally in the community. Maybe there are things that I haven't heard about. So I'd love to have people call in, share if you have events going on, if there is a great band that you want to go hear. I really want to just kind of hear what's going on with folks out there in the community. Call in tonight, contribute your thoughts as well. And I'll just go ahead and get going with my thoughts, and we'll see where it goes. Like I said, one of the things that I've really, really considered strongly, I'm going to see how far I can get with this microphone so I can get closer and closer to the rest of the equipment over here. One of the things that I have certainly had on my mind in relation to this recent spate of extraordinary gun violence caused by terrorists is that this is not a new conversation. It's a part of a conversation that I believe we as a country have really been avoiding for quite some time.
And I think as the evening goes on, perhaps I will distill, kind of down to exactly what I think I see there. And folks are welcome to call in and contribute your thoughts, your feelings, your comments, your questions. And that'll be fun because that's what we do here is we talk about stuff. And then, as I said, please inform me of other things that I'm simply unaware of. There's obviously other news out there. I did post some questions. I didn't have a whole lot of time to get prepped tonight. So I put a couple of questions up on the live stream, and I am not entirely sure where you go to see that, but it's listed under interactive. And so I put up a couple of questions for people to maybe consider in regards to a couple of the big stories out there. Maybe I can get back into that at some point and ask a couple of more questions for people to participate with. So if there's something, again, on your mind and you want to call in and share it, please do. The phone number here at WRWK 93.9 is 804-464-1089. I will do my best as well to keep up with what's happening on the live stream so that if people comment there, that I can try to follow along. Let me see if I can figure that one out. Because I haven't done it on an additional device. But it's really hard for me to keep an eye on the phones and the board itself if I am trying to watch the screen behind me for the computer. So let me see if I can figure out how to jump on to the live stream without it making noise so that I can watch. There we go. Okay, cool. So there you go. I will do my best, like I said, to keep up with some comments here if folks want to pipe in by the live stream as well. So I want to share some thoughts with you. A couple of different, hey, here we go. Somebody else is ready to play. Hang on just 1 second. Thank you for calling WRWK. Would you like to speak? Would you like to go ahead and get online? Okay, hang on. Go ahead, caller, you're on.
Yeah, I've really started to consider the United States as being one of those nations we read about that have active internal conflict and that we are not at peace, that actually the Civil War never ended, that it just kind of went underground, albeit not very well, because parts of it stuck up pretty obviously with little flags, and flags marking where the those troll locations are. And now they're coming back out from under the rocks, and they're actively seeking to restart this thing called RBB, which is Ku Klux Klan speak for Racial Holy War. And so they like to abbreviate things their way. They have the Ku Klux Klan has an entire vocabulary, and it was fascinating listening to this activist named Daryl Davis, who's a musician, who has started conversations with members of the Ku Klux Klan and actually converted a fair number of them to abandon their membership. And they've given their robes to him as part of their leaving of the Klan. And so it was fascinating to hear him talk about it. And he gave a lecture in the Richmond area last year and talked about how the Tiki Torch Parade in Charlottesville was yet another attempt to restart RBB, which is, again, Racial Holy War. So they've been at it the whole time, and they have not stopped. And I think it's just ramping up now because they just had such a collective flip out that a black man was elected president that what we're seeing now with the election of Trump and his speeches and his stochastic terrorism, we've elected a terrorist. And he's a terrorist in chief, just like Ayatollah Khomeini. He does the same thing. He'll issue a fatwa. Of course, we don't call it that, but he'll issue a fatwa, and all of a sudden, here pops up some person he never actually spoke to directly. But that's how stochastic terrorism works. It gives plausible deniability to the terrorist leader because he never met that guy, and he didn't need to. He just had to issue code phrases and it would trigger somebody to go off on their own. So I think we should consider the United States as a country that's not at peace, that is experiencing an internal ethno-state conflict. There's an active collection of cells that seek to reverse democracy. They're counter-revolutionary cells in the finest tradition of going back hundreds of years. So, you know, the United States is not at peace. We are at conflict, and I think just large swaths of us haven't realized it yet. Kind of like the Brontosaurus Rex, you step on their tail, it takes a while for their head to notice.
Wow. Thank you for your comments. I am while I find the speech potentially incendiary, I don't disagree. So you know, based on history and fact and the behavior that's been witnessed thus far. So there's that. And now I'm like, yeah, so that's a bummer. And next. So vote like your life depends on it, folks. Excuse me for 1 second, Chris, while I do a quick station ID. If you're just tuning in, you are listening to WRWK 93.9 FM in Midlothian, Virginia. My name is Stephanie. This is In the Frequency of Hope, and tonight it's Off the Top. Give us a call and tell us what you're thinking about. The number is 804-464-1089. Chris, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking once a critical mass of us accept the proposition that we are not at peace and that we have an active series of counter-revolutionary cells seeking to overthrow the state. We call it deconstruct the state, but it's basically the same thing. How do we act differently? So what do we do differently if we don't think of ourselves as being at peace? And that's an open-ended question. I don't have the answer.
I don't. That makes two of us, and that's a little nerve-wracking to feel like we don't know how to get from A to B. Clearly knowing, where we.
Not saying the United States is the leader of the free world. We could start by saying that anybody who's thinking of coming here should think of themselves as moving to a war zone, and you know, take appropriate precautions that you would take for visiting any war zone.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
And again, I was actually very concerned about that myself when I first heard about the breakdown of the El Paso shooting in particular. With the manifesto, etc. Cat's got my tongue. I'm not sure what to say because I agree with you. And now what? I think like you, I'm saying now what? Now what?
Yeah, so that's what I've been thinking all day. Now what? I'm not
anybody
sure
else out there listening, if you got some ideas about now what? Now is a really good time to chime in and tell us what. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Chris?
No, that pretty much covers it.
Alrighty.
Kind of a mouthful all by itself.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for calling in tonight.
Yes, you do a great job.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to you again soon.
Oh, yes. Bye.
All right, folks. So thank you very much for your comments, Max. If you guys didn't catch that, wow. What can I go back and say? I can go back and I can say that we just discussed, I'm going to throw out a term there for you, and I'll actually go ahead and I'm going to look it up so that I can hopefully pronounce it and define it for you properly. Stochastic which is STOCHASTIC. It means randomly determined, having a random possibility distribution or a pattern that may be analyzed statistically but may not be predicted precisely. And so he was talking, so stochastic behavior means something that pertains to chance. Or what looks like it pertains to chance in the terminology that was used. That was the descriptor with terrorism, and so it means that the cells are designed. The way that it's designed to look is that there is no way to go from what has happened in individual circumstances kind of back up to the place where the messaging is really coming from. So there you go, for anybody who missed out on that. And I will go ahead and I'll copy that. Let me see. Stochastic. Terrorism. There we go. I will go ahead and throw that definition into the live stream in just a second. So I want to share with you some other thoughts because it's, well, it's related to, I believe, what Max was just referring to. Chris was talking about, you know, so a part of the source of some of the violence that we're seeing is coming from this one particular group of people who are functioning as terrorists in our society. And so related to that, what I want to add to that, it actually just gets into the gun violence nature. So I think that I'm actually going to hang on to that for just a minute. We'll talk about that a little bit separately so that the two are not conflated inappropriately. I have seen a lot of information out there today throughout the media talking about the young men who perpetrated these horrific crimes in a variety of different terms, and it almost depends on who you're listening to. You know, whether or not they have a specific political bent, whether or not they're going to be promoting a message that clearly this young man displays some form of mental illness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that is in fact the quote unquote cause of what happened. As opposed to folks that are down the line demanding that we take a look at what is common in every single one of these situations, whether there's mental illness involved, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's gang violence. The commonality is with the guns. And I, like many people who believe that we can make a difference if we do something with legislation around that, are really quite frustrated with the appearance, the folks who appear to not be willing to even acknowledge that. That's problematic. It makes it seem like we can't have a really in-depth conversation if we can't agree the facts of what already happened. So what I want to share with you is a letter that was shared with a friend of mine by email today. And what was passed on was a direct quote that came from John Pavlovitz. I've mentioned him in the program before. He is a minister and an author that I follow and think the world of. Anyway, this is something that he wrote several years ago in 2015, following yet another mass shooting. And I can't even tell you which one because it's not listed in the information in front of me. But I'm just going to share with you what he said. I am grieving again today. Once more, I am mourning the senseless execution of beautiful souls taken in the prime of their lives and in the middle of their innocent ordinary. I am again grieving more premature funerals and canceled weddings and discarded futures. And I want to be alone right now. Gun lover, please don't tell me you're grieving along with me today too. You're welcome to mourn,
but I don't think I want your company right now. If you're still against sensible gun control measures, I don't want you to grieve alongside me today. If you're part of the zealous, gun-glorifying community, I don't want you to grieve alongside me today. If you're a militant, unrepentant NRA apologist, I don't want you to grieve alongside me today. If your right to bear arms ultimately matters more to you than the human wreckage strewn about movie theaters and shopping malls and elementary schools and nightclubs and hospitals and festival grounds, I don't want you to grieve alongside me today. Not again. Not now. Change the laws. I believe that I have shared with folks, certainly on an individual basis, perhaps even on air before, that several years ago, when I still lived out west, I was really deeply impacted, emotionally impacted after the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And at that time, I had been, sure, a fan of the Million Mom March and the Brady campaign. You know, I was dutifully signed petitions when they were sent my way. But I don't think that I'd been particularly active in that arena before then. Sandy Hook is also the event that spurred on the action of the very amazing Shannon Hobbs, the woman who founded Moms Demand Action. That has turned out to be an absolute powerhouse of an organization out there working, much like MAD did, to combat drunk driving and its the way that people would rationalize it. And I feel very much the same way. In psychological terms, if you will, regardless of the source of dysfunction. But I think alcoholism is one of those things that's relatable enough for most people to get. You know, that you're constantly avoiding the elephant in the middle of the living room. And that's how I feel like we treat guns in this country. It's nuts. Of course that's the problem. Hello, McFly. And I realize that there are people who feel utterly threatened when I say that. I'm literally not after your individual guns. As another citizen, as a person who has no desire to fire a weapon in the first place, but, you know, has tried it out, I don't want your guns. I think a buyback is a very reasonable way to get started because I think reducing the number of weapons that are available for people to pick up and do whatever with is a great idea. I think that moving to something like a 100% universal background check that is utterly mandatory in every single purchase and every single transfer, always, no matter what. I think that is a good idea. I have a couple of other kooky ideas if people really want to go, you know, and get into that subject. I don't think that any of those things are unreasonable. And I don't think that any limitation that we put on what a gun manufacturer is allowed to sell in the United States actually infringes on anybody's rights, just to be clear about how I feel about the Second Amendment. That finger pointing was very intentional, folks, because again, we're going to have a deeper conversation later as I'm plotting out the calendar this fall about what we truly value as a community. And I think that will be a very rich conversation. So
In other news, I'm going to move on because I don't want this to turn into a show where I talk about just the one thing the whole time. There's a whole lot going on. Again, that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show this way tonight is I recognize that particularly here in the Midlothian area, and I'm familiar with folks in, that have been participating thus far with the Work FM, kind of needing a space where we get to kind of get together and talk about some of these things, I think. And radio is the perfect format for that, if I haven't mentioned it lately. So if you're at all interested in how this whole thing works, if you thought that you ever wanted to stand in front of a microphone and just talk to people, and sometimes people will listen, then you can do what I'm doing. I'm also the board operator for my program, so you can't see what I'm waving at over here, but it's the whole thing that makes all the bells and whistles work and so that you can hear me on the radio. And we can teach you how to do those things. And we'll be teaching other things, other skills that are associated with a functioning radio station. So if you're at all interested in being a part of that and kind of helping us grow, and your assistance in helping us grow is going to leave your stamp, your imprint on it as well. That's what community radio is. It's a collaboration of people from your community working together to make all this noise. And so if you've ever been interested in something like that, I would really encourage you to get in touch with us. You can send something to info@theworkfm.org. Or you can message us through Facebook. And just know that we will also be expanding. We are looking into expanding through other social media platforms, so that we can expand our listenership. So be on the lookout for that you'll see us on other platforms coming up. Exciting news here at the Work FM. And so I just want to give a shout out to all the folks that have checked in so far. Hope you guys are out there. And if you've got something to say, give me a call. The number is 804-464-1089. I see Leslie and Stephen and Sheila. Hi, guys. And Chris and Tammy and Ian. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Tell me what's going on in the world, in your corner of the world, or what you're aware of that's been happening out there. I'm going to share a couple of things with you that have been on my mind. So here we go. First and foremost, because it is a local program, is the kooky weather. We're going to get into another piece about weather or climate, really, if you let me go on. Anyway, just want to point out that it's been actually really, I think, so much less awful than it could have been, but we just got through one of the hottest months. Nope, the hottest month since they ever started monitoring such things. That's what we just got through this July, which is disconcerting information. There have been great ice losses in various ice packs as a result of the extraordinarily high temperatures last month. Here in Richmond, on Monday, August the 5th, 71 degrees, and we are expecting rain intermittently through the evening. Tuesday, a little bit cloudy, a high of 91 degrees. Wednesday, 93 degrees. Again, some storminess. Thursday, we'll go back to sunny, 92 degrees, 92 again on Friday. So it looks like a lovely week. It could be hotter. Just remember that. And wear your sunscreen. And there you go. That's the weather update for this week. As I said, I was just going to share a piece from local CBS 6. July 2019 has replaced July 2016 as the hottest month on record, with meteorologists saying that global temperatures marginally exceeded the previous record. The EU's Copernicus Climate Change Program, which analyzes temperature data from around the planet, said that July was around 0.56 degrees Celsius warmer than the global average temperature between 1981 and 2010. Slightly hotter than July 2016, when the world was in the throes of one of the strongest El Niño events on record. El Niño events are characterized by warming of the ocean waters in the Pacific Ocean and have a pronounced warming effect on the Earth's average temperature. Though there was a weak El Niño in place during the first part of 2019, it is transitioning to a more neutral phase, making the extreme July temperatures even more alarming. So there you go. While July is usually the warmest month of the year for the entire globe, according to our data, it was also the warmest month recorded globally. With continued greenhouse gas emissions and the resulting impact on global temperatures, records will continue to be broken in the future. And so there you go. No fun on the climate front, not yet. We are hoping to make some changes, though. And I think that Greta Thunberg, along with Extinction Rebellion, is actually going to be starting to do more stuff here in the United States, which will be, I think, a good thing. Hang on just 1 second, please. WRWK, would you like to speak on air? All righty. What's your name? Hello. All right. And caller, go ahead.
Hi, you there, Steph?
Yes, I am. Hi, Ian. Thanks for calling in tonight.
Hey, you have touched on so much tonight. I mean, I am feeling the show. Like the whole shooting thing has got me feeling like grumpy. I'm like taking people's heads off, like, because I'm just grumpy. I'm mad.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
That my country is being taken over by these jerks. And I think what's worse is if it wasn't, if it was just these abstract jerks that are doing this, it's like one thing. But, like a lot of Americans, I'm a social media consumer, and I like go to different sites to see things for my interests. I don't go to political sites anymore. I gave up on that. But if I want to go to a car site or a boat site or something like that, I'm surrounded by these people that are apologists for these guys and people who almost sound like they're cheering for them. And I'm seeing these young men either willfully ignorant about what's going on or in full support of it. I mean, saying, hey, today I was kind of venting a little bit, and I was being called a crybaby by these 22-year-old men who actually, when you look at the profiles, they look like, MAGA guys. So, I mean, I don't know what to think about what's going on in the world, but it really is discouraging, and it really makes me just disgusted. I'm over what's going on is it's surreal to me, and I'm just angry.
Yeah.
So I can feel your pain.
I feel that, man. I really do. I was listening to I listen to WRWK when I'm in range, when I'm in the car, and when I'm not, I flip to whatever's closest. Really, is usually what happens until something catches my attention. So I was listening to a couple of different pieces today, and of course, all sorts of news kept coming out, and so they would go through and they would discuss it all over again and again and again, and wow. Just, I'm driving down the road crying most of the day.
That we should have mostly a blue household. They all had guns. People, I mean, I've always grown up around that. I mean, that's not unusual to have guns. That's not a bad thing necessarily. But you're right about the controls, and we've not allowed to have an honest conversation about it because the NRA talking points tell our leaders, hey, it's not a good time to talk about it. Or it's zero-sum game. They won't let us get our foot in the door with any common sense rules. And I mean, people do not realize to the extent that the NRA has hamstrung our Congress and our leadership. They have hamstrung them in a way that is incomprehensible. They just think it's a gun rights organization. They do not understand how they have tied out the hands of our leadership so they can't even make common sense rules. And so, I mean, there's plenty of gun owners out there that do not like what's happening. And then I don't think there's anyone saying, hey, take away your gun. But
I don't want their guns.
We gotta have honest common sense.
I think a buyback is reasonable. I think limiting the access to what are clearly weapons of war is thoroughly reasonable. Because every time somebody gives me,
I would just do it.
Yes,
whatever.
Well, the assault weapons ban worked, and since it has stopped, the incidents of shootings has increased by 200%.
And the Brady bill. I mean, Brady was what, chief of staff to Ronald Reagan, wasn't he? I mean,
Yep.
So
Yep.
how ironic is that? One of the most effective gun control and most sweeping gun control legislation of our lifetime was under a Republican administration.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the things that really bothers me, because I certainly believe that, when we're talking about the things that are literally life and death, like in the, in the flash of a gunshot, that transcends partisanship. I don't think that, I don't believe,
what's going on over there, guys?
I do not believe for 1 second that because someone identifies themselves as a Republican or a conservative, that they value life less than I do. I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
No, they might not value.
So we have to find a way to move. We have to find a way to move beyond.
They believe in.
We have to find a way to move beyond the conversation where it sounds accusatory. Does that make sense? So that we can get to a place where there is some level of compromise, because there has to be something that can be done. It is not a matter of buying backpacks, bulletproof backpacks for our babies so that they are safe to go to school. That's crazy.
That is crazy. Bulletproof backpacks. I've seen that.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I just hope that we wake up before it's too late, because I'm not one to live in fear. I'm not, and I don't want my kids to live in fear. I want them, if they want to put a concert, to go to a concert. But I have friends that are telling their kids, that are the same age as me, the age that goes up the clubs and stuff, don't go out. They're instilling the fear in their kids, and that's not the world. I mean, this is America, land of the free, home of the brave. I don't want to live in fear. I want my kids to live in fear.
Exactly.
I'm not going to teach them to fear.
Exactly. Since when are we living in war zones? When did that become a thing? I thought the whole point of all the other skirmishes around the world was to prevent any of that from happening here.
I heard one of the congressmen this weekend on the Sunday talk show. I don't remember his name. I wasn't familiar with him, but he actually literally said he feels that we are in what he described as a cold civil war.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
I believe that the Republican Party has been taken over by Confederates. Period.
Oh yeah, I was watching a Facebook thread today on a car site that I frequent, and it was all about this Confederate flag sticker. And this thing went on with like 400 or 500 posts, and I would say the vast majority of people were like, "You guys are a bunch of crybabies. You guys are a bunch of snowflakes," And I'm like, "Are you watching the news? Are you paying attention to what's happening?" And there are a bunch of they're either openly like neo-Confederates, or they just have their head in the sand and they're singing some crazy talking points that they learned, like they're that it's about states' rights and this nonsense, And I'm just like, it's so discouraging that we're still having this conversation, really.
Yeah. I like many other people, I really, really, really believed that the slaughter of kindergartners was going to motivate people to force our legislators to do
it was great
something.
For Alex Jones' ratings.
And I'm still gobsmacked when I think about the fact that happened almost 7 years ago.
It created in our vernacular the fake term crisis actor, quote unquote.
This is sort of it's like the conversation could go a couple of different ways from where we are. We could keep talking guns, but because you just said it, I find it very interesting that the platform who wants to go public with an IPO actually decided to go ahead and pull access to 8chan, and so they are off air now. They don't have a place. Now, they are still transmitting information from other locations, but they have lost their website effectively.
You know, what took so long?
And
for
so
8chan
here's
to
me.
go away?
Here's me when I'm catching up on the news on Twitter, and I'm all like, okay, now do 4chan. Like, what are you waiting for?
There is a 4chan. Yeah, do 4chan.
Right?
Yeah.
What are you waiting for? So, anyway, but 8chan is apparently the place where at least 3 people have put their quote unquote manifesto prior to committing acts of violence, public acts of violence. So anyway, I find that interesting because there's a whole bunch of people, gun enthusiasts who are screaming about free speech. And I'm just like, no, baby, that's market work. That's the market at work. These people want an IPO. They want to protect their name. They want to continue to do money with the rest of the public, who, by the way, overwhelmingly supports various gun legislation such as universal background checks and mandatory waiting periods, and there are some other things that we could discuss, but we could do this all night, Ian.
Well, I did the whole thing about the free market. It's so funny because that was the mantra of the conservatives for like the whole lifetime, and now they hate the free market.
Every time it works, they don't like it.
They love cap and trade was a Republican idea. You know, if you wanted the free market, that was the market for a mechanism to answer to pollution, and now they hate that. So, if it's free market, it's their friend until it's not. Then we use it against them, then suddenly they run for the free market. So, yes, the free market acted, and, the capitalists wanted to go public, and they shut 8chan down, and I'm sure now the free market is once again not their friend. So
True that.
How about have you read the article about the 17 million disenfranchised voters?
Okay, so I have started looking.
Systematically targeted to be since 2016 have been removed from the voting rolls, and many of them don't know. They'll show up to vote in 2020, and they will be off the voting rolls.
I need to look that up because I don't have the details in front of me. But yes, I was looking at that. I was really shocked when you told me about that. I was like, wait a minute, how does that happen? Because that's a really significant number of people. And so what we're talking about is a HuffPost article that came out that says that 17 million voters have had their registration canceled since the 2016 election.
The source of the information was the Brennan Center, which is a think tank that has researchers. And they produced this report, nonpartisan group called the Brennan Center.
Okay.
And they said 17 million people, and if you look at it, it's not random. It's very specific. It's mostly people of color, poorer people. They've been disenfranchised systematically by these counties and these red states and red counties. They've just been targeted. They've figured out ways to get them off the voting rolls with various little things and tricks. Trickery. It's not enough to win an honest election. You've got to be really tricky now. And that's, when you're the minority, party, and you have to resort to gerrymandering, to disenfranchisement, all manners of dirty politics and dirty trickery, the likes of which, the more they become the minority in the party, the more emboldened and more blatant they are with their deceit and their willingness to do anything, to pull out all the stops to maintain their slipping grip on power. And they do not seem to have any code of ethics or moral compass. It's just whatever they need to do to hold on to power. And it's really getting wild. It's completely unapologetic. And they would just look at you right now and say, "Hey, I built a better mousetrap. You're mad. Don't be mad. Don't hate.
Right.
I out-tricked you."
And that's what's really problematic. The what I find is really problematic is that attitude, because it's the same thing that I recall the president saying about what is probably his tax evasion. When he just said, "Don't." Fix your face, don't be mad because you didn't, get over and I did. Like, really? Did he say that?
Oh, yeah. He's the one that said, hey, I didn't pay any taxes for like 20 years because I'm too smart. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And America's face was like, yeah, he's smart. He doesn't pay taxes. What if everyone didn't pay taxes? What But yeah, I didn't carry out my trash when I went hiking in the national forest. That's for suckers. Why would I want to walk around with trash? What if everyone just left their trash in the national park? I mean, why have rules at all? Why, if you're smarter than the next guy, you can figure out how to get out of the rule, then, why have rules at all? They don't apply to you. You're special.
Well, that's
where we're at on the right, it feels like. They just, the rules don't apply to them.
right. And that's how we define our community, is by our shared values.
And it's being set, the tone is being set at the very top, and this is what our children are growing up with.
It's really problematic, the quote-unquote values that are being displayed from the top down these days.
Yeah, well, yeah, it all just melts together on days like today when we come in to work and we have to digest this Charlottesville times 10, times 2 anyway. I mean, 22 lives.
Oh, gosh. Way more,
in
yeah.
Boston, in Walmart, and then another 9 in Ohio.
And there were 3 plus the gunmen in California.
I read an article the other day that one of the guys that was in the Garlic Festival in California survived the Las Vegas thing with his spouse.
Oh, that's the second one that I've heard of.
Shooting and walked into another one months later.
Right, so that's the second person that I've heard of about that, because there was a gentleman who died at the bar in, where was it? Someplace in Southern California. It'll come back to me. It was a country and western bar, and one of the people there that died there had survived the Las Vegas shooting. So.
Oh yeah. I read that one too. I remember that. I read that too. But anyway, so yeah, lightning strikes twice. Hopefully in my lifetime, it never strikes once.
And that's not okay
for so many people. It
right.
means it's really prevalent.
But I mean, lightning striking is supposed to be rare. And I believe that getting shot to death in your own community when you live in the United States should also be really, really rare.
And you hear like, hey, it's a mental health issue, or it's this issue or that issue. But, the only rebuke you need to have for that is look at what's happening in every other country in the world.
Yeah.
If this is unique to us.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying that we are uniquely mentally ill? I don't think so.
Oh, it's the guns.
It's the guns, and there's something else going on. I'm not going to say it's the only gun. There's something else going on.
I mean, I could go through my entire list, but it's really TLDR. It's the guns. That's the short version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I liked all the topics. Everything you hit on was really on target tonight. Anyway, I appreciate your show tonight. And
thank you, Ian. Thank you, Ian. And tell me a little bit more. Well, no, I don't. So yeah. Well, I was going to check with you about. We have a new show starting soon. So, am I going to be hearing about that also tonight? Do you think?
Well, I don't know about. Well, yeah. Well, we have. There's an announcement on our page that you can see a new event, and I'm hoping next week we'll be launching a new show with Jamal Lamont Thomas. He's got a very popular YouTube channel. He's a self-described left-wing political junkie. He's got a different take on politics. It's just like all flavors of politics, there's different subsets and sub-flavors. He's definitely got his own take on stuff. For example, I've had some spirited conversations with him and pretty much really enjoyed his position. And then he has some ones that were just very different. Like he has some very unique takes on Russia's role in the election and what may or may not be, I mean, he just got some very unique takes. So just when you think you've heard everyone's opinion or everyone's take, you get some fresh perspective. And I just really enjoyed Jamal. I'm looking forward to him launching a show. Hopefully we can get it off the ground next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a drive time. It's one of our first drive time programs.
Oh, awesome.
I'm really excited about that. And we're also he's going to help us launch our YouTube channel, I think.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm excited about Jamal Lamont Thomas joining the team, and so yeah, thank you for bringing that up. His show is called The Progressive Soapbox, and you can also look up his his YouTube channel by the same name.
Progressive Soapbox, and it's going to be here on the Work FM Tuesday the 13th at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, it's going to be a live call. It's going to be a live call-in show, so we'd love to get some activity for that.
Excellent. I'm very excited to have a new show starting. Yay, here we grow.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that up, Stephanie. Thanks again for your show tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ian. Have a good evening. All right, folks. I owe you a station ID because Ian and I were just so into it that I didn't do it a couple of minutes ago. This is WRWK 93.9 FM in Midlothian, Virginia. We are serving Chesterfield, Henrico, Goochland, and Hanover. We're using community radio to build a bridge from city to county, left to right, and neighbor to neighbor. Tonight, what I decided to do with the program is called Off the Top, and that's just off the top of your head and off the top of my head. So I just opened the show really just thinking about what's going on in the community. Share with me what you know, what's happening wherever you are, and what's going on in current events. If there's stuff on your mind, call in. Let's talk about it. And in between, when you're not talking, I have to, because that's how radio works. So I'll just keep bringing you the ideas that I have about different things that have come up. So we have talked a little bit, not a little, maybe a little bit more than a little bit, about the several mass shootings that took place in the last week. And I think a lot of us are just really stunned and horrified. It was stunning and horrifying. The first one that I can really go back and think of was perhaps at the San Francisco City Hall. And then somebody shot up a high school, and it's just kind of grown. The movie theaters, the nightclubs, churches. It's just never ending. I think the frequency, over the last week, the high body counts, and just the complete average situations that all of those who were murdered or maimed, I think hits way too close to home for us. So one of the things I was listening to earlier today was asking, can a large group of people have PTSD? The answer to that is yes. That's the nature of terrorism. That's what happens. And you're right. You don't think clearly and you don't function properly when you are suffering PTSD. And yes, an entire nation can be suffering PTSD in regards to this one thing, or a large percentage of us. And so I think that bears maybe a little extra thought. First and foremost, please be thinking about your self-care at this time. It's really easy to get distracted by a whole lot of this negative stuff and kind of get sucked into whatever that is, and then you wind up not really taking good care of yourself. So put the device down at a reasonable time so that you can relax and get to bed on time. Hopefully that you will have dreams that are cleansing to your mind and help you settle things, but hopefully are not also turbulent and disturbing. Eat well, brush your teeth, all the good stuff, At times when we're really suffering, though, I think it's really important to get a reminder that we need to do those things, because it's really easy to drop when we're over emotional. Okay, so prepare yourselves, because what I've decided to do, I was listening to another radio station earlier today, and I was so impressed with the two people I was listening to, because they started offering short biographies of each of the people who lost their lives in these mass shootings. And the fact that they were able to maintain their composure while doing that while I was listening and driving and could do nothing but blubber, I was really, really impressed with. So I decided at that moment that while it's really important for me that I would like to go ahead and acknowledge these folks, and I'm going to do so by reading their names, I won't be able to get through sharing a ton of information about them for you, because then you guys are just going to hear me cry. And that is not what we started this radio station for. So, quick station ID, because we are at the top of the hour. This is WRWK 93.9 FM. My name is Stephanie. You are listening to In the Frequency of Hope, and tonight we're doing Off the Top, so it's off the top of my head. And right off the top of my head, what I'm thinking about is the people that we lost. Each of them had a very important place, clearly in their own families and likely in their own neighborhoods. But in a larger sense in our communities, each of those people had a very important place, and their loss is being felt, and that loss is reverberating throughout our country, kind of rolling through, I believe, in waves. Part of that is the shock and the horror as we read about different circumstances, and it's important that we understand what happened. Some of the details, I think, I don't think it's beneficial to necessarily know all the details unless you're working the case. What I am going to do, though, is, as I said, I would like to share the names of each of those people that was lost in acknowledgement. And then when I get to the end of that list, we'll have a moment of silence. In Gilroy, California, at the Garlic Festival on, this is about a week ago, we lost Stephen Romero, age 6, Trevor Irby, 25 years old, Kayla Salazar, 13. And the gunman also took his own life at the end of his rampage. Here we go. In Dayton, Ohio, Lois Oglesby was 27. Had recently returned to nursing school from maternity leave. Megan Betts was 22 years old and the sister of the shooter. Saeed Salah was 38 years old. Derek Fudge, 57. Logan M. Turner, 30 years old. Nicholas Coomer, 25. Thomas McNichols, 25. Monica Brickhouse, 39. And Beatrice Warren Curtis, 36. Ms. Curtis was visiting Ohio from Carrollton, Virginia. And in El Paso, this morning when I was on my way to start my day in the car, there were 22 reported deaths from the El Paso shooting. By this afternoon, when I was on my way home to get ready for tonight's show, 2 others had been added to that list. Jordan Anchondo, 25 years old. She was shielding her 2-month-old son, who suffered broken bones. Her 23-year-old husband was also murdered. Arturo Benavides, Mario D'Alba, Jessica Coca Garcia, and Memo Garcia. There are 7 Mexican nationals who were killed in Saturday's shootings. Their names are Sarah Esther Regalado of Ciudad Juarez, her husband Adolfo Cerros Hernandez, Jorge Cavillo Garcia from Coahuila, Elsa Mendoza de la Mora from Yepomera, Gloria Irma Marquez from Ciudad Juarez, Maria Eugenia Lagareta Rote from Chihuahua, and Ivan Filiberto Manzano from Juarez. Angie Inglesby was 86 years old and died at the Walmart in El Paso. Leo Campos and Maribel Hernandez. And those are the names that have been released thus far. Excuse me. I remember doing something similar years ago when I was still working with a chapter of the Brady campaign, and I helped organize a press conference with our local up to federal legislators and gun violence victims and other organizations, doctors, etc. And I recall at the time that was something very similar. I lived in California at the time, and we were in the midst of passing a slate of, or attempting to pass a slate of bills through the Assembly in California. And I want to say there were probably 10 different points in that, maybe 7 different points in that. And the Brady campaign was in support of a number of those measures. So as a part of that event, I wound up reading out the names of people lost in a variety of mass shootings. And even if I don't take the time to go through and read aloud other detailed information about those folks, the reason that I'm not doing that is because I know that I'll get choked up. So I can certainly add some information to the live stream, and people can follow up if they would like more information about any of those folks. So moving right along. Here's another tidbit that I picked up on today, and I really wanted to make sure that this made it into the conversation because this is absolutely local, folks. The Richmond City Council met today to talk about Navy Hill proposal. And that is something that I think that a lot of folks, particularly our Richmond neighbors, are probably a little more on top of perhaps than what's going on out here in the county. But that's a very important chunk of real estate. It includes the Coliseum and then another, I don't know, 10 surrounding blocks or so, a lot of which is residential. So what's happening over there really, really matters. And I would just beg folks to really stay tuned in, pay attention, and make sure that you're paying attention to what they're doing and that you're getting involved at whichever opportunities you can toward making sure that that development whatever development takes place there is beneficial for the city and the residents of the city. Okay. So a couple other things that came across my purview today. Oh, goodness gracious, there's just been so much. As a couple of other people have spoken about already, there's this concern about domestic terrorism and what we are or are not doing about that. And I think that's a legitimate concern, particularly given that I was listening to an interview today with a member of the FBI who was discussing that, really post 9/11, they've become so focused on outward, on terrorism coming from without, that there's not a coordinated effort really watching what's happening in the United States. So any domestic terrorism is really referred back to whatever structure is available within that state. So without the coordination, between states, we're clearly missing some information. Clearly, as was established, that there are these different channels of communication that are going on that are somehow outside of the mainstream. I'm guessing is the indication. I've not visited some of the sites that have been discussed, or that these notorious websites that host these conversations where violence is glorified. And apparently that's a normal topic of conversation. So I have no personal experience in that. The bits and snippets, that have gotten out into my consciousness, at least, I've been sufficiently horrified by. And so there you go. One of the things that's in that, though, is that I don't want it to get lost that it's about this one website, because it's not. The website was a tool that was being used. And I also don't want, well, I hope that other folks can kind of see the same picture that I see, in that the culture that we're talking about that is present in these discussion boards on 8chan and 4chan and wherever else they're taking place, that culture itself is white supremacy. They're simply using the tools of mass distribution and anonymity that allows them to distribute their propaganda. It's the exact same model that we've been studying terrorist organizations and cells use around the world, as our first caller, Chris, was talking about. And I think that really bears further thought and consideration from every citizen. But I think that, given the fact that I don't feel like the folks that we have put in charge are sufficiently concerned with our health and safety. And I think we just have to make it much clearer that what our expectations are. So, furthermore, there was another piece that I was looking at today that I thought was really super interesting, that I want to share with folks, if I can get into it somewhere in here. There we go. That talks about the idea of quote unquote evil actions and mental health. And there are statistics out there that indicate, how infrequently someone who really suffers a mental health condition commits an act of violence, as opposed to how incredibly frequently they are in fact victims. So I don't really want to spend a great deal of time on this, other than just know that there's a lot of really good information out there that refutes these ideas that are just being injected into the conversation by whether it's a lobbying, whether it's an actual lobbying force, that represents gun manufacturers like the NRA, or people who have simply been indoctrinated by whatever garbage comes to them by Fox News. Not to denigrate another news source, but I mean, hey, this is my show. We did do that piece about this. All this is my opinion. So beforehand. So I keep hearing people bring up the same talking points that do not gain. They don't gain validity purely through repetition. They were invalid the first time they were uttered. They continue to be invalid every single time I hear them. That's neither here nor there. I'm getting myself distracted, so I'm going to go back to what I was doing. When we talk about these things that are happening in terms of mental health, I think the thing that's really important to understand is that when I try to think about what I think is normal, and it's just very much like what I was talking about earlier. This is symptomatic of dysfunction. Identifying the source of that dysfunction is important if you want to correct it, just like it is with alcoholism. Yes, we can see that family is dysfunctional, but until we know what the source of it is, how do you fix it? And so I think that's what we're kind of getting to here, is understanding that the source of this appears to be white supremacy, and a truly virulent form that's been pushed in some circles, I guess is the best way to say that, leading young men to believe that somehow or another that this is the appropriate action, that in order to prevent people from invading his country, this was the action that was chosen. What I don't want to see happen for those of us that are thinking clearly in any way, shape, or form is that sort of behavior gets rationalized. And that's the problem with what I see. What I see that comes from, whether it comes directly from the NRA, whether it comes from talking points from whose is what's it's on pick a network or pick a radio program, whatever. Just the idea... The idea that if you just repeat the incorrect information over and over and over again, that people are just going to believe it because they've heard it over and over and over again. That has to stop. That has to stop. People have to stop pushing that narrative. And I hesitate to get into a battle of quote unquote truths, except that, mine comes with math and facts. Anyway, I would never jump into a gun conversation without them. However, getting back to this idea about evil that's being committed and whether or not that somehow indicates mental illness, I may casually use the word crazy when I refer to someone who has committed an act of violence. Now, whether or not they were crazed because there's some sort of a chemical imbalance and they suffer a mental illness, or they were crazed and they just chose something really messed up, that's really the determination, I think, when it comes to mental illness. The behavior is the same. It looks like they're crazed. And I think that I think that one can be driven to extreme behavior without being crazy. Absolutely. Whether one drives themselves or is assisted. And that, again, that is still open for discussion. I believe that I see a direct link between some of the stuff that's coming that's not even being hidden in these, whatever, the dark web or on 8chan, something I've never heard of, but much like what Max talked, our first caller talked about, when he started, is that we have someone in national office who, from the Rose Garden and from his Twitter handle, regularly lambasts other citizens and or immigrants. and regularly employs racist rhetoric at his rallies, and that's a setup for someone who is still forming their ideas, someone who's very impressionable. They don't have to be crazy to, if they just really take to heart when you continually insist that these people are invading your country, particularly in a country where we utterly fetishize the military. We treat them horribly. I mean, as far as, what they get in pay and, well, all forms of recompense, given the fact that they put their lives on the line day in and day out. But, we lionize them in a way that's as if they're making them heroes, but without context, because those heroes, we are sending these people away to go kill people somewhere else. I mean, that's their job. And so it shouldn't be that big of a surprise to us that we have young men in our country who believe that they're doing a service by reporting to the local Walmart and blowing things up. And that's the problem. We broke something, and we broke it good. I don't know about fixing it, but we broke it good. Agree with me or not? I would love to have you call in. The number's 804-464-1089. And I really am going to move on to other things because there's a ton of other stuff to be talking about. Besides that, there is a ton of other stuff to be talking about that's going on in the world. So I'm going to click through and look for my notes on the other things that I was thinking about mentioning tonight. So let's talk about the potential for impeachment. That's on my purview because there was a recent write-up on my Congresswoman, Abigail Spanberger. And this is a write-up from CNN, and it says that one moderate Democrat thinks she's found a way to survive in an impeachment-centered Congress. And so it's very interesting in here that this indicates that, there we go. She came to Washington in the throes of a government shutdown in January, elected on a blue wave made up of dozens of centrist Democrats like herself. But she's also in the same class as a small number of progressive insurgents who have made names for themselves touting how Democrats need to impeach the president. Some a little more colorfully than others. Last month, some of those progressive lawmakers attacked their moderate colleagues for backing an emergency spending bill for the border. What she said is that she rejects all drama. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't serve any purpose, and it is not effective. Her fate, however, will be inextricably linked to that of her party's presidential nominee. So it's a really interesting write-up. I have to tell you that I am thus far a big fan. I've been very pleased with Ms. Spanberger's service to her district and her representation thus far. I get more than just email bounce backs, from when I contact her about whatever an issue is for me as a citizen. And I'm happy to report that. You know that responsive politics is one of my favorite things. Anyway, one of the things that I would be interested in hearing from folks tonight is, I know that there's a whole lot, that there's so much going on in our news atmosphere, that things get lost or they get shuffled to the back burner very quickly, but it was less than a week ago that Representative Cummins was in committee and making things really uncomfortable for the administration, and has asked further questions of Robert Mueller regarding the Mueller report, and is issuing subpoenas for a variety of things for his committee. And so I think that impeachment is not done. It's not a done deal. It's not a conversation that we get to stop having. I, for one, am a proponent. Now, understand that impeachment means investigation. It doesn't mean removal from office. So I am a big proponent of Congress conducting an investigation. I think that's the appropriate action. And then once we get to the end of it, then we have something that we can contend with. So we may discover that that no laws were broken, that and that seems unlikely, but it could happen. Or we may discover that the laws that were broken don't rise to the level of Congress requesting the president's removal. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think as long as we put off even doing the investigation under the guise of, no, it's terrible, it's going to tear apart the country, we don't want to revisit what it was like in the Nixon years, yada, yada, yada. Or, this is, as our first caller alluded to, this is just the beginning of the racial holy war. All of those things be damned. If we don't shine a light on it and figure out what's happening, we can't fix it. Again, I'm a big, big, big fan of looking at and examining everything with the lights on. So, impeachment. That's what I have to say about that. It's appropriate. You've got me on record. I've already contacted my representative as well as the Speaker of the House to let her know that that's what I think. And there you go. That's what I think. I'd like to hear what you think. That was really kind of the whole point of, that was really the whole point of start doing the show tonight, was to get other people's ideas. So a couple of different things that I want to mention to folks is another thing that came across my purview is to be thinking about the police state that we find ourselves living in. And this comes to you from fee.org. Imagine you are in the middle of your typical day-to-day activities. Maybe you're driving, spending time with your family, or working. If you're like most people, your phone is at your side on a daily basis. And little do you know that at any time, police and law enforcement could be looking at information stored on your phone. You haven't done anything wrong, you haven't been asked for permission, and you aren't suspected of any crime. Police have the power to collect your location along with the numbers of your incoming and outgoing calls and intercept the content of the call and text communications. And they can do all of this without you ever knowing about it. They're using a shoebox-sized device called a Stingray. This device mimics cell phone towers and prompts all the phones in the area to connect to it, even if the phones aren't in use. So if you weren't aware that these things are being used and that there are 68 different agencies in 23 different states using them, you may want to double check with the ACLU and lodge a complaint. That is what I can recommend on that end. I came across that and I was like, well, how about that? I didn't know that. A couple of other things that have come across my view this week of a more local nature, obviously. The pipeline projects that are taking place here in Virginia. The Mountain Valley Pipeline continues. The work on that continues, even though they're still they're still under suit by the state. They are constantly violating Virginia law as well as other agreements in their contracts. And creating more and more dangerous situations. So here's an interesting thing that came up for me yesterday, brought to you by Jonathan Sokolow. He is an attorney that has been working on the Mountain Valley Pipeline case for quite some time. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is working at a breakneck speed, trying to finish its destructive path through the mountains of West Virginia and Virginia. Never mind that the courts have thrown out multiple federal permits that are normally required before pipeline projects are allowed to proceed. Never mind that Mountain Valley is billions of dollars over budget, years behind schedule, and unable to ever go in service because a federal court ruling blocks it from crossing the Appalachian Trail. Never mind that the company is under criminal investigation by the United States Attorney's Office in Roanoke for violations of the Clean Water Act and other federal laws. Never mind that the Commonwealth of Virginia has sued the Mountain Valley for more than 300 violations of Virginia state water laws and regulations. And never mind that the company is working on steep, dangerous slopes, flipping their equipment over, sending debris snowballing down a mountain, and almost killing bystanders in the path. We knew they would always put profit ahead of people, and we knew it the day that they hired a contractor to build this corporate boondoggle, a Wisconsin-based company called Precision Pipeline that was investigated for environmental violations on previous pipeline projects. Precision Pipeline's track record was so bad that it was sued by Dominion Energy. Yes, that Dominion Energy, the one that you get your bills from every month, for causing 50 landslides in a 55-mile pipeline it built for Dominion. Did you hear me when I said 50? Precision Pipeline clearly does not care about the environment or the rights of the people whose land they are desecrating. As it turns out, they don't care about their own workers. Precision Pipeline has left a trail of mayhem in its path, and mayhem to its own workers. In 2007, a 67-year-old Pat McCaffrey was working on a steep hill building the Millennium Pipeline in New York. He was crushed when a side boom he was operating rolled down a steep hill and then ejected and crushed him. He was 2 miles deep in the wood when the accident occurred. Police and rescue crews took 2 hours to reach the victim in all-terrain vehicles, pronounced dead at the scene. In 2010, 61-year-old Charles Kuhn from Ohio was working on the Ruby Pipeline project in Nevada. According to press reports, he was working on a section of pipe that was next to the trench when it started to roll. He was knocked into the trench, and then the pipe fell on top of him. His death was one of a string of accidents on the Ruby Pipeline project. Anyway, the whole point is, oh, there's more. Here we go. In 2012, Robert Leon McDaniel of Louisiana was killed on the pipeline project in West Virginia. He attempted to place a large section of pipe into a prepared trench. The pipe was on the wrong side of the trench. He and another employee tried to use an excavator to pick it up and transport the pipe. When they tried to rotate it, a 7,000-pound pipe crashed through the window of his heavy loader. He was impaled. In 2016, Leonardo de Jesus was a truck driver from South Carolina delivering 16-foot-long rolls of straw matting for a pipeline project in West Virginia. While attempting to offload the heavy matting, the forklift operator carelessly and negligently knocked a 25-roll pallet off the top of the trailer. The pallet, weighing approximately 2,500 pounds, fell from an elevated position and violently smashed into the plaintiff. He was crushed and pinned underneath the massive weight of the pallet, causing serious injuries, including but not limited to traumatic brain injury with resulting depression, compression fracture, broken right thumb, permanent wrist injury, right shoulder rotator cuff injury, hematoma, fractured teeth, abdominal injury, hernia, cervical disc herniation, nerve damage, and knee and ankle pain. Life flighted from the site. And I'll have to go see if we've got any further information about Mr. De Jesus and his condition today. In 2018, Roy Benny Sanders from Texas was working on a pipeline project in West Virginia. He was driving a utility vehicle known as a side-by-side on a hill when the ground gave way and he fell off the side of the hill. He was ejected from the vehicle and died as a result. This is another pipeline project operated by Precision Pipeline. In 2018, 2 workers were operating a piece of equipment used to clean the inside of pipes on the Mariner East 2 pipeline near Pittsburgh. 1 man and 1 woman were injured while operating the equipment known as a pig. Both workers were employees of Precision Pipeline. anyway, the point is that the company who has been contracted to work on this particular project here in the state of Virginia has a history of their own workers getting hurt, whether injured or dead. And that's really disconcerting. For anyone who is just tuning in, thank you for joining me. My name is Stephanie. This is In the Frequency of Hope. And you're listening to WRWK 93.9 FM in Midlothian, Virginia. We are local independent radio, local independent media, and 100% supported by our listeners and participating businesses in our community. If you are appreciative of what you're getting out of the programming here at WRWK, we ask that you stop by our website or our Facebook page and find the donation widget that will take you to our PayPal account and let your appreciation be felt. Awesome. We will appreciate you very much as we are stroking checks to pay our bills for the rent and the lights and the things that allow us to stay here bringing all of this to you. Okay, so that's one of the things that's on my mind is the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline is less and less likely, I think, to even really get off the ground. I am going to take a break from the headphones because they're absolutely crushing my ears. I haven't found comfortable headphones yet that work with our board. But the reason that it's on my mind is because I can absolutely see the damage that's coming, the environment in the area. And so I do mean waterways, some of the land. So some people's livelihoods have already been deeply impacted, if not destroyed, in parts of Southwest Virginia where the work is going on to build the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And as I said, in that piece that was written by Jonathan, that even if they build the entire thing, they still lack the permit to ever run anything through it. So it makes no sense for them to be building at a breakneck speed considering the incredible damage that they're causing. So if that is something that you find meaningful, I would recommend that you get in touch with the governor and the attorney general and let them know. I think it's also probably worth mentioning something to the folks at Dominion and just let them know that you as a consumer, you as a citizen, this is how you feel, this is what you want to see. I think it's really important that we stay on top of that stuff. I had hoped that we would have been able to avert ever beginning construction for these pipelines, because if you haven't heard me talk about them before, I can give you the rundown pretty quickly. The first and most important thing I think that Virginians need to understand is that not one drop of that natural gas will ever come into the state of Virginia for use. It will flow throughout those pipelines. It will go directly to the coastline through a variety of feeders. It will then be refined and it will be sold in Europe or other markets. It doesn't matter. It's going to be exported. It is not worth destroying the beautiful, pristine land that is the state of Virginia in sight of profits for some other company. It's not profiting me. It's not profiting you. It's going to be profiting this company who has a really horrible track record of cleaning up their mistakes. Know that going in. So again, if that's meaningful to you, please contact your legislators. Take action accordingly. What else have we got going on? I want to go into the questions that I actually posed for folks tonight. So if I can find that stuff, although I don't know that I can. Okay, it looks like I can't actually look at oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, I have one comment that came in, and it says that we need a new Coliseum because I love live music, and top acts will not play Richmond due to the terrible sound quality. It makes me feel like we live in a second-rate city. And I agree with you that the Coliseum needs to be rebuilt. And then we have another comment that came in, and it says, I agree that music venues are necessary in the city, but not at the expense of city taxpayers. We need to fix basic things in the city like our schools, our roads, and services before spending one dime on a music venue. There we go. And so that's the conversation that's going on right now about what's happening in Navy Hill and the Coliseum, because there's so much more in Navy Hill than just the Coliseum. So all of those things also very important. There we go. And it looks like somebody piped in and said assault weapons ban, yes. It's Mark Brandon said that. And he also said that, well, I'm not going to have to say that. You can go read that. There we go. So that's some of the conversation that's taking place on the live stream feed. Again, we'll be here. Well, I'll be here. I'll be here for another 20 minutes tonight. So if there's something on your mind and you would like to call in tonight, and share it with me and the rest of the listeners, please do. The phone number here is 464-1089. Sometimes I go through the week and I consume enough news and pop culture to hit this level where I feel really overwhelmed. And I think at times like that, you have a tendency to just kind of try to winnow it down to something that feels like manageable bites. So I have a tendency to go into particular, areas of interest for me. And one of the projects that I've been working on over time, it's, kind of building, that's going to be a future show, is really looking at some of these historical sites around the state of Virginia. So I attended a lecture last week that was actually put on at the Virginia Historical Society, and it wasn't about history at all. No, I'm kidding. Of course, there were things reflected in history. It was a discussion about the changing face of politics and perhaps what to expect in the presidential election in 2020. And I was thinking about that in relation to all of these interesting sites, that I've seen as I go through. I think I've talked to you guys a little bit about this before. As I'm driving around and I see those black and white signs, it's a historical marker. If I can, I will go ahead and stop. I'll read it and I'll see if I can see the place or identify whatever is being marked in that place. So I will be doing a whole show on that later this year for folks. I do encourage you to take a look at the American Evolution app. It's available. That was put out by by Virginia Tourism, and it's the one that I'm referring to that lists all of these wonderful places. Lots of really interesting information they've put together there. So it's a little less haphazard than the system of, oh, I see a sign, let me go see it. Anyway, if you wanted to learn more about some of the history here in Virginia, that app is really handy and chock full of good information. So I was out thinking about that, and then I was sort of thinking about all of those things kind of how our history informs our present. And how that is in fact going to inform our future. And I'm trying to collect my thoughts so that this sounds like it makes sense rather than the way it sounds in my head. Anyway, I guess one of the things that I think that I see, and I've touched on it in a couple of different programs, I think, before, but I want to posit the idea before we close the show tonight to really ask people to be doing some really deep thinking, so that we can be narrowing in on finding solutions. I did a program last year that I think was titled "What Angry Men Want." because I had some questions based on what we're seeing out there in the world. And a couple of the examples that I was thinking of are a variety of dictatorial leaders from around the world, authoritarian sort of regimes, the anger that is exuded by the current administration, seemingly just about every time he approaches the microphone. The anger that is just dripping off of these young men that are going out and shooting up our schools and our theaters and nightclubs and churches. The anger, that is involved. Like there's something definitely in that, and we need to take a look at that. Anger it's an emotion, and it's an indicator that something else is going on. I usually think of anger as being an emotion that's there to cover other things. It feels more empowering to exude anger than it does to admit your vulnerability and express fear. And so I think that's where I think that I see it most often. So I think anger is a component. I think our near worship of the military is another component. And I want to say in the same breath, don't at me, bro, because it's not like I don't love military members individually. I do. And it's not like I don't have a healthy respect for people who serve our military, because I do. I frequently question the missions they are sent on. Yeah. And whether or not somebody is really thinking about the long-term consequences of some of those actions. Anyway, and I believe that that's much of what we, you reap what you sow. I believe that's much of what we are seeing today, is this hyped up militaristic attitude, as a response to the fear that we felt as a country after 9/11. And it's been ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. That's not it in and of itself, but I think it's a component. And then, earlier this spring, I did another program where we talked about dominionism versus democracy. And perhaps I should more accurately call that fundamentalism. I believe they should be, well, hopefully people understood what that was. Dominionism being a particular type of Christianity that is a very fundamentalist version, I guess is the best way to say that, because there are many, there are some differing finer points of the dogma, but the overarching common thread in these various sects is a fairly extremist version of Christianity. And I think that that's a component. Whether or not someone has an interior, deep relationship, a faith relationship with whatever their higher power is, considers themselves to be a spiritual person, if they believe that they're, fighting for their religion or their freedom of religion or their sect, that in and of itself goes very much against, I believe, what our founding fathers were trying to establish, this great American experiment. One of the tenets of that was that you and I can be right next to one another, worshiping our own gods, as it were. And yet we can be neighbors, and yet we can work together. And that ultimately, I believe, was a part of the vision at the founding of this country. So it greatly concerns me when I hear a lot of rhetoric that would indicate that there are folks that don't agree with that, because that's definitely one of the basic tenets. And that it's mixed up in the rest of this hyper-masculine, overtly violent culture. And somehow or another, it's not the video games, but the pop culture surrounding that elevates some of these elements that aren't the ones that deserve to be elevated. Much like the conversation about when we have mass shootings, let's stop even using the name of the shooter, let's focus on the victims. And I understand that need, that desire from within to deny them some sort of notoriety, or not notoriety, they're notorious already, but some sort of fame, even if it is infamy, associated with their action. And I get that. It's interesting. I was following a social media conversation that was talking about the ages of the 3 young men who've committed these 3 recent acts. And it's like 19, 22, and 24, which is pretty shockingly young for such it feels shockingly young for such a painful expression of hatred and rage. But it's not uncommon. I mean, that's the perfect age for guys in the military. And that's exactly what we ask them to express when we send them out to do their duty across the world. So, again, I posit that, these monsters are of our own making. And because they are, that means that the solution is also within our reach. Yeah. Anyway, I really did promise you, me, and everybody that that we were going to talk about other things besides just the mass shootings this weekend. So I do want to open the conversation to other things. I was hoping that we would get a little more participation from the community, announcing perhaps some other things that are going on that have just escaped my view this week, because I've simply been focused elsewhere. I've been working my bum off, and some of the work that I've been doing has been really quite physical. So I'll get in the evenings, and it's all I can do to eat, shower, and get to bed. So I've been a little less present, really in any cyberspace, because it just feels like it's too much effort to even turn on the computer sometimes. I know that sounds silly, but it's true. It does happen some days. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm starting to fade a little bit here because I have run out of the things that I had planned on telling you. I want to scoot through, though, and make sure that I'm not missing out on anything super important. So I'm going to kind of come through a couple of different ideas that I have already had, and make sure that There we go. There's another piece that I absolutely do want to share with folks, though. I saw this earlier today. Some of you know that I'm a Robert Reich fan. So this was actually in response to something that he said earlier. And the Declaration of Independence lost moral force along with enlightened leaders who had the capacity to action on them through the strategic dumbing down and undereducation of citizens, as well as the birth of a new aristocracy through phony trickle-down economics, which is a longer version of saying, yep, we created this monster. And again, I say to you, if we created it, we can fix it. You're going to get nothing but hope out of me tonight, folks. Alrighty. So a couple of announcements. Tune in this Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. for Human Equal Rights with a focus on her. That will be Leslie. And then on Thursday at 4 o'clock, the Self-Care Activist with Mary. Friday evening, Tanisha, we are rerunning her program from WRIR. It's called Critiques of the Culture. And so now you know what's going on for the rest of this week here at WRWK. And of course, as I said earlier, Jay will be back on Sunday, the 11th with Citizen Voices. I'll be back next Monday with another riveting conversation about who knows what. We'll find out when we get there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep tuning in to WRWK and supporting local independent media. Good night.